willow, and we're going to ask them to come and light a candle. Thank you very much. Kallie had a really colorful life, and I think those of you who are here and those of you who are joining us online have shared parts of Kallie's life that have been funny, that have been new to us, that have been really special, and have given us a sense of the person who lived a life so well. He really lived what he believed. I've shared with some of you that it really impacted on us after his death what a simple life he led. Many of you talked about his barefoot and flip-flop days. I couldn't find a pair of shoes in his house at all, actually. He really shunned material things. He was unerringly generous, and today we're here to celebrate his life together. We're going to start our program by asking a friend, a comrade, a religious leader, Farid Esak, to pay a tribute and to open today's proceedings in prayer. Thank you.
Beloved family, friends, comrades, and associates of our dear departed brother, Kallie Hanekom, I request you to rise for a moment to remember and quietly reflect on the departed life of Kallie, and for a moment of silence. Thank you. Transcendent and sustainer, we confess our timidity before you, our consciousness of the limitations of expressing our words, our gratitude to you for all that you have blessed us with. And Bram, we can fight later about the use of the word blessed. And we are gratitude for the temerity of asking for more. We come with trembling hearts and inadequate words, and however inadequate these words are, they are all that we have. And we guess you will get it. Our transcendent and our sustainer, we offer our gratitude for the life and the presence in our own lives of Kallie, our comrade, our friend, brother, brother-in-law, father, grandfather, and uncle. We are thankful for the inspiration that he was to, and the wisdom that he shared with us and countless of others. We give thanks for Kallie's madness, for his infuriating complexity that drove many a mad one up the wall, and for his stubborn refusal to be a normal white Afrikaner guy, an identity that then represented a bleak darkness for the vast majority of the people of our land. We offer our gratitude for the doggedness, the stubbornness on just being Kallie during a transition in our country when far better material opportunities beckoned. We give glory to you for Kallie's humility, the gentleness with which he walked on the earth, and his embrace of anonymity. He embraced this gentleness and anonymity despite being the font of wisdom with the vastness of his reading, the sharpness of his wit, and the depth of his intellectual capacity. He walked gently despite the extent and the depth of his profound commitment to the struggle for a free, non-racial, and democratic South Africa and a more just world beyond our borders. He did so despite his own deep personal familiarity with fellow giants in our land, the likes of Chris Hani, Steve Biko, Beyers Nodi, and Albert Nolan. And now, Lord, after that attempt at expressing gratitude, I, along with all of those sharing in this moment, have two things to ask of you. We pray that you accompany Kallie's loved ones in this time of their bereavement, and parenthetically, just in case you are not really there or here, we desire that his loved ones at least feel accompanied in this moment of loss, particularly after all the food and the savories have been consumed and someone has to lock the doors, and after the last goodbyes. We pray that you walk with us, enable us as we tread Kallie's path of raw honesty, selflessness, weirdness, and a love for justice. His furious disdain at injustice and his rage against corruption. And now, just before last word from me, a loud and enthusiastic amen from all of you. Amen. Please be seated. I'll just take another moment to say something about Kallie. My last moment with Kallie was a few days before his exit from this phase of his life. I was mindful of Kallie's family's differing levels of acceptance and of coming to terms with the idea that this was his last move on the chessboard of his early life. When to visit him, Bram announced my presence, which Kallie initially got wrong, and Bram repeated it. Now, for a moment, when Kallie mispronounced my name, I didn't quite know, given Kallie's physical state, that he actually no longer remembered who I was, or if it was just another manifestation of a Hanekom propensity, well, certainly as exhibited constantly by Bram, of butchering other people's names. Was this what Kallie was reenacting, the Hanekom thing? Kallie quickly found his bearings and asked me three quick things. He asked me how I was. He asked me whether I was still at the University of Johannesburg. And finally, he asked me what I was working on at the moment. The norm for sick people, especially when they are very, very sick and comatose or just slightly lucid, is not to ask about the person in front of them. That person asks, how are you? And what did the doctor say? And. So however superficial, it was profound. This, how are you? The last one, just after, are you still teaching? His question, whether I was still in the academy, was even more remarkable. His lucidity in organizing his three questions. Now, the question of what are you doing at the moment? It's quite an awkward one for many academics
who, are they working on anything seriously? Is it worthy of mentioning or not? For any academic not really working on anything, it's an embarrassing question. So, regardless of where he was, with his innards literally hanging out, Kallie entered my world and wanted to listen. This entering the world of others, regardless of his own pain, baggage, or condition that he was in a particular moment, this was one of his greatest gifts. I treated his question seriously, even if not entirely honestly, because I wasn't up to much academically. And I responded to it as if he had all the lucidity in the world to engage with what I was working on. I was still kind of in my second or third minute when Kallie's eyes slowly closed and he meandered away while I was still speaking. So let me stop here before you do the same. Hambagashle, comrade Kallie.
Thank you for a beautiful tribute. I didn't say at the beginning that I'm in that category of an in-law, which you probably assumed if you didn't know me. I'm the sister-in-law to Kallie. There are family members here and friends. I'm sure some of you will recognize during the proceedings. But I specifically asked Father Peter John to come and sit close in case at any point I collapse in tears. So I already made a mistake. We should have stood and sung the national anthem first, so let's do it now. Thank you. Thank you. So Kallie died on the 9th of August. It was Women's Day. It was actually the same day that Rodriguez died. So we were thinking of putting some Rodriguez music in the playlist, but then we thought it didn't quite fit with the memorial service. The family had many hours with him. He had been in hospital since April. So there really was an opportunity to talk about his life. Many of you who are here, he talked about in those many hours. And the people who are here, I'm sure each and every one of you, and we'll share with you when we have lunch, the many things that he said during those long hours about you and the importance in your life. But it was an illustration of a life that had such big circles of friends. And we certainly did get some surprises along the way of people whose life Kallie had touched and whose lives had touched Kallie that were new stories to us. It was captured very aptly by Murray, a new friend from Fishhook. And Murray posted a message saying, wow, didn't realize who I was having coffee with the whole time. So humble. Thank you for that, Murray. The first 3 tributes today are coming from friends who've known Kallie for 40 to 50 years. They'll speak about periods of Kallie's life from the 1970s to the 1990s. The first speaker will be Mike Deeb, Father Mike Deeb, who is a very special friend to Kallie. He's the godfather of Kallie and Jenny's son, Bram. Oh, sorry, Joe, got the wrong way around. I'm your godmother. Got it the wrong way around. The second speaker will be Virginia Zweigenthal. I think you lived with him. Where are you, Virginia? You lived with him at the absolute height of his simple lifestyle days. The third speaker is Mike Lapsley, Father Mike Lapsley, who is really the godfather of Bram. They've all known Kallie for most of his life and were special friends to Kallie. We'll follow that with a few of the special tributes. We would have loved to read them all out, but special tributes from that period, and those will be read out with a few comments of her own by his good friend Catherine Hunter. The speakers all think I won't intimidate them, but I will. They've got 5 minutes, because we're not going to keep you here all day, and we will have another set of tributes, and we do want to ensure that we don't eat into the time of his sons and his brother to pay their tribute. So if they can come up in succession, we'll start with you, Mike.
Good morning, friends. So I'm very grateful to share this with you. I met Kallie 50 years ago exactly at the 1973 annual conference of NCFS, the National Catholic Federation of Students, and he and I worked very closely together for the next 6 years as we struggled to respond to the disaffiliation from NCFS in 1971 of all the Catholic societies, or the Cathsocs, on the 4 black university campuses. It was during the black consciousness period was flourishing at that point. So these black Cathsocs, they disaffiliated in order to determine themselves, as they put it, and they challenged us whites to redetermine yourselves. So when Kallie was elected NCFS president in 1974, together with the national chaplain Albert Nolan, whose life recently we've been widely celebrating since he died 10 months ago, Kallie that is, was the main driving force in enabling white Catholic students, and later many other students of the broader Catholic student movement, to become more integral to the struggle for democracy in South Africa. He did this especially through initiating the creation of small groups using the See Judge Act method on all the university campuses, the white ones that is, which formed the core of what became YCS, Young Christian Students, which we know played a critical role in the UDF in the 1980s. Kallie was not always a radical. He recalled how, on the way to his first NCFS conference in 1971, the Stellenbosch Catholic chairperson, prepared him to counter the manipulation of the left-wing guys at the conference that they were going to. However, Kallie could not resist the powerful influence of Albert Nolan's uncovering of Jesus as a promoter of fearless, radical love and justice. Combined with Kallie's work in the townships, as he headed the Stellenbosch student organization for Ontwikkeling, and he was also living in a commune with some radical students who led him to read books by theorists such as Marcuse. Kallie's daily collaboration with Albert Nolan especially radicalized him. And this in turn also radicalized Albert, because Kallie was a big force on him. Kallie became very principled, refusing to enter any restaurant or movie house restricted to whites only. For the next 9 years, while Albert, prodded by Kallie, transformed the understanding of Christian faith in a whole generation of students, which drew us into a necessary active involvement in the struggle against apartheid, Kallie largely provided the political vision, and he led the mobilization of students and structures on the ground. Furthermore, along with other NCFS members in Joburg and Pietermaritzburg, who were impressed by Albert's emphasis on Jesus' value of sharing, lived by the early Christian communities, Kallie also initiated a commune in Oak Street, in Observatory, where a simple lifestyle was emphasized to counter the economic injustice prevailing. He recently recalled to me with humor how from this perspective I was very critical of him because he was regularly buying Diet Cokes, because I didn't realize that he was addicted to caffeine. As a full-time assistant to Albert as national chaplain from 1975 to 1977, Kallie regularly visited most of the black university campuses, even while those universities were regularly in turmoil due to the student protests. Aiming to assist the strengthening of the CathSocs, which in 1976 formed CASA, the Catholic Students Association, there were several attempts to kick him off these campuses, not successful, from the authorities and even some students. In this period, Kallie met Steve Biko several times. Then in 1977, Kallie spearheaded the formation of YCS from the White University See Judge Act groups, and in 1978, he and I attended the YCS and IMCS World Sessions in Valladolid in Spain. You'll see some photos there. When Kallie discovered that YCS internationally was a dominantly secondary school movement, he realized the crucial importance, in the wake of the 76 student revolts, of starting YCS in black schools. And so on his return, he immediately organized a course in 1979 to train 12 organizers to thus spread the movement. Soon thereafter, YCS was transformed into a dominantly black secondary and university movement. Kallie, meanwhile, at the end of 1979, went to do a course in France where he started collaborating with the Paris-based international team of YCS, and he and Jenny returned in 1980 to Zimbabwe, where he played a key role in establishing the Pan-African coordination of YCS. Throughout the 1970s, Kallie was very involved with all levels of the Catholic Church. He knew all the bishops. He was elected candidate to be the president of the Bishops' Conference, of the Catholic Laity Council, and he knew the Dominicans very well, and in the early 2000s, he even wanted to become a Dominican, but his age counted against him, which was a big disappointment for him. So, to conclude, Kallie was one of the biggest influences in my life. Although he was difficult to pin down and his continual busyness often frustrated me, his warmth, sensitivity, loyalty, and friendship touched me very deeply, and I loved him dearly. I'm so grateful and proud that Kallie and Jenny asked me to be the godfather of Joe, the first of his two amazing sons, which enabled me to become integral to the family. And finally, whenever I've thought of Kallie, since he returned to South Africa over 30 years ago, I've had a deep sense of tragedy. His exceptional analytical and organizational talents and his principled, simple lifestyle and compassion for all people, and especially the poor, were never really recognized, with some of his own obstacles in the way. And they were wasted in a post-apartheid South Africa that sorely needed him. Yes, Kallie. Yes, Kallie. You've left your mark on me and on so many others beyond the many who are here today. Thank you, my friend. Rest in peace. Ambagahle.
Thank you for the very beautiful tribute, and sorry for chasing you to speak faster, Virginia.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor for me to talk about Kallie at his memorial service. I'm Virginia Zwigenthal, a public health doctor and somewhat of a lapsed Catholic. I met Kallie as a Wits student at a YCS meeting at Josetto, the equivalent of Oak Street, a lefty Catholic house in Berea in Johannesburg in 1977. He was a visitor at our strategic planning meeting. We didn't call them that in those days, but actually that's what it was. From Cape Town, where he was a UCT YCS chaplain. He had a quiet but compelling demeanor and a circuitous way of making strong points, and we all listened carefully. YCS, as Mike has spoken about, is a movement that was focused on action on the side of the poor, the marginalized and oppressed, and looked at faith in the light of this reality, interpreting the challenge of the Gospels. After finishing my Wits science degree, I was invited to be an organizer for YCS in Cape Town by Matt McNally, who's here, and Mike Haddad, who I think is online. My task was to expand the university movement's membership beyond the white middle class. I was 20. So in 1979, I moved into Kallie and Jenny's somewhat dilapidated rented house in Scott Road Observatory. Kallie, a networker of note, had many contacts of parents from parishes around Cape Town who were politically inclined, and I contacted their university-going children to see if they were interested in joining YCS and forming a group. Hard work for me. I was rather socially awkward at the time, just 20, but with Kallie as a mentor, one just got on with it. Our house was committed to living a simple lifestyle, sharing our assets, I had none, and our lives. Our rental was 35 Rand a month, inexpensive even in those days. We had no fridge or stove and a makeshift benches for lounge furniture. No hot water, but we had Father David Russell's gas water heater for the bath. I had no bed, and we bought one off an auction for 2 Rand. Needless to say, I was covered in flea bites the next day. No big deal, just part of life, and I moved on. 1979 was a key year, the year of the YCS course, which brought together young leaders identified by Kallie and other networks in South Africa, preparing them to become organizers and spread the YCS countrywide. People such as the late LGBTI and HIV activist Simon and Corley was part of that group. Sharon Wellmans, who was on the course, had successfully started YCS groups in Hanover Park, which soon became a hub of educational dissent and protest. There were cries of "down with gutter education." You remember that slogan? The school's boycott and the rise of socially strong, politically sussed student leaders like Jonathan de Vries, Zenaria Barnes, Zaki Ahmad, Opalehu Lere, and Mzi Mbangula. They frequented our house, which was always welcomed visitors. We worked with the church's Urban Planning Commission CUPS, who ran leadership weekends at Dorfalk in Muizenberg. The school's leadership group, who included Ibrahim Patel, also ran workshops. I remember Jenny leading the simulation game of Star Power, which demonstrates structural inequality to participants. The rich became richer and powerful, and the poor became poorer and very oppressed. Kallie had many lefty Christian friends and was thoroughly ecumenical. David Russell, Johann Marie, Francis Wilson, Jim Cochran, and the Christian Institute. He was also connected to the Guguletu Catholic parish, where Father Dick O'Riordan was parish priest. In 1978, the key youth leader, Lumka Huna, who's now late, was sentenced to a spell on Robben Island. Father Dick assisted Lumka's group with printing underground leaflets for distribution. In 1978, Father Dick was deported from South Africa after his support for community action, holding funerals in his parish, including for Elijah Loza, a trade unionist who had died in detention. In these last months, Dick visited Kallie in hospital, and Kallie loved those visits. Kallie intentionally sought out contact with ex-political prisoners through Dependence Conference, a branch of the SACC based at the Racial Relations Building at Mowbray Station. He developed a friendship with Christmas Tinto, a Langa stalwart, ANC stalwart, who was released from the island in 1978. Kallie's affiliation was clearly to the ANC. Mr. Tinto, also known as ComT, and I met regularly for years after Kallie had left South Africa. He went on to become the founding member of the UDF in 1983. We had projects. We discussed the plight of families of political prisoners who lost all income due to breadwinners' incarceration. We started a self-tax club, Kwela, with the guidance of mentors such as Tony Saddington, who had seen such schemes in action in the US. He helped devise the method for recruitment, donation, banking, and disbursement. This was a monthly tithe given by the employed people, mostly university staff, who wanted to contribute to that politic. I did the banking, packaged the money, and ComT delivered envelopes monthly to around 20 families in and around Cape Town, and also to the Dalinyebo family in Umtata. As Kallie had, through ComT, I met ANC struggle veterans from the 1960s who lived in the migrant hostels in Langa. They were a cell with struggle aliases like Castro and Brezhnev. Their work focused on conscientizing young people, involving them in soccer teams, and if willing, spiriting them away to Lesotho or Botswana through walking over the border to join the ANC in exile. Our lefty Christian contacts obtained the funds. ComT and I arranged the money for these young people, and he arranged the transport. When Kallie moved to Zimbabwe, I visited his home. Like Cape Town, it was always humming, with comings and goings of South Africans and ANC comrades. I met with Joe Gabi in a room in that house just before he was murdered. A striking presence, he was a wise listener who gave good counsel. His death was shocking, and we were all delighted that Kallie's firstborn was named Joe. Kallie expanded my horizons to embrace a commitment to a non-racial, socialist South Africa along the lines of the Freedom Charter. He generously welcomed me into his wide, amazing friendship circle. I visited Kallie in a hospital twice, first when he was in the general ward, and then in the days before he died. At this last visit, I spent time with Joe, who generously shared this precious time with his dad with me. Thank you, Joe. I spoke to Kallie, who seemed asleep, but responded to me. I was able to tell him about his impact on my life and thank him for introducing me to a world that was life-changing and to purpose that has endured. It shaped me as a young adult, challenged me, enabling me to make the life choices I have made. Thanks, Kallie. You live on in all of us, and I'm so glad for your gift of friendship.
this section, our last tribute is from Father Mike Bapsley. Do I need to hold for you?
Dear friends, I cannot remember when I first met Kallie, but it was nearly 50 years ago. Since that time, I have regarded Kallie as a brother, a comrade, and a friend. In the last few days, I have been thinking and praying about what I might say to you today. Many of you became part of the WhatsApp group created to celebrate Kallie's life. Only in death are people realizing and getting glimpses of just how many lives were impacted by Kallie. Kingsley Mamabolo, our High Commissioner in London, asked me to pass his condolences to the family, but also to all of us. We were all together in Zimbabwe in those days. I went into my phone to read again all the messages I had received from Kallie in the last 8 years. Like his Facebook page, what shines out was Kallie's quirky sense of humor, his love of people, his internationalism, and his faith. Part of me wondered if I should wear flip-flops to honor Kallie or just come with a big cup of coffee today. Even now in the next life, I am sure Kallie has created a new social gathering place, a cross between the coffee society of Rocky Street and Yeovil and the Coffee Bean and Rondebosch. Just last night I was speaking to Rene Brown, a dear friend who now lives in Denmark. He reminded me that we first met after he was employed by Kallie at the Coffee Bean. I met Kallie when he was president of the National Catholic Federation of Students, and I was part of the Anglican Student Federation. For a number of us, this is the third time we have been here in this church hall in the last couple of years. Firstly, we were here to celebrate the life of Albert Nolan. Secondly, we were here to launch a book of tributes to Father Albert, and now we are here to celebrate the life of Kallie, even as we grieve for our loss. There is a profound connection between the three events, which in a way Mike Deeb also alluded to. Just as Albert was the national chaplain of Catholic students, Kallie was the president, both embodying the relationship between faith and justice. And both were motivated by their faith to become underground operatives of the African National Congress of South Africa. Kallie championed the liberation struggle. Indeed, the struggle was his life. Countless people were motivated to join the struggle because of Kallie. Kallie was unique in so many ways, and there was always plenty of laughter around him. Once in Zimbabwe, Kallie came to me. He told me that he was feeling down because he only had his last $50. He insisted that we should go out to dinner, so we did. Now we had no money, but we felt better. Kallie told me that when it came to boycotting South African wine, it did not apply to Zimbabwe. When I looked doubtful, Kallie insisted that I try drinking Zimbabwean wine. Now you see, he said triumphantly. My favorite story, as told by Kallie himself, was when he was visiting Switzerland and looked at the Swiss Alps. Kallie explained that if you screwed up your face in a certain way, you could see Table Mountain. How appropriate that years later, Kallie was employed by the campaign to keep the parliament here in Cape Town. Many of us, like Kallie, South African freedom fighters, became Southern Africans. The forests in which we hid, which fed us, loved us, protected us, and became our lifelong friends, were the Zimbabweans, the Basotho, the Botswana, the Swazis, the Zambians, the Mozambicans, and Angolans. They made our struggle their own, risking life and limb for us. Not surprising that Kallie and Jenny's son, Bram, a fluent Shona speaker, became an activist for the MDC and created PASOP to fight and advocate for Zimbabweans here in South Africa. Bram became the go-to person for Zimbabweans in strife. Without the sacrifices of the region, apartheid would not have ended. The prevalent xenophobia, shame survived without our friends from across the region. I also recall Kallie's response when Trish and Derek were detained, tried, and imprisoned. He moved heaven and earth to internationalize support for them, asking me how we could gain support from a Zimbabwean friend of mine who was at that time chairing the Security Council of the United Nations that particular month. In democratic South Africa, how Kallie lived his life with simplicity and companionship to all makes him a role model for our nation. Kallie's life is in sharp contrast to the endemic greed and corruption that is daily destroying our dreams. Even in his dying, Kallie remained true to his beliefs, insisting that he be treated in the public, not the private healthcare system. As a consequence, he experienced both the worst possible as well as the very best that our public health system offers. I had the privilege of visiting Kallie several times in hospital. One of the things that struck me was the strength of his faith and how his faith and praying together comforted him during these last months. I'm sure that Father Mike Deeb and Father Dick O'Riordan can also bear witness. Today, I'm sure Dick is with us in spirit from the Emerald Isles. So many prayed with and for Kallie and for his loved ones. When I prayed with Kallie the day before he left us, it was for a peaceful departure to join the ancestors. I am sure that Bram Fisher and Joe Klabe continue to smile as Kallie and Jenny's two sons, named after them, make all of us proud with their lives of commitment and service. Would somebody just look at Trish for a moment? I'm getting to the end, Trish. For me, it was beautiful to witness how many of his friends and family rallied around these last painful months, especially Trish and Derek, Joe and Bram, and Marissa with their children, accompanying Kallie day and night until his final breath. How wonderful that Joe, almost Dr. Joe, could complete and send his thesis while sitting at his father's bedside. How appropriate that three of Joe and Bram's godparents, Trish and Mike and I, are here today to bid farewell and thank Kallie for being part of our lives. We knew that godparenting, like parenting, is for keeps, and so we will continue to play our part until. Let us all continue until our last breath to honor Kallie's memory, to strive to make our nation, our region, our world kinder, gentler, and more just. Thank you, Kallie, for sharing your life with us. We will carry you in our hearts forever. Kallie, rest well, good and faithful servant. Your work is done, ours is not. I thank you.
Thank you for another beautiful tribute, and we're closing this part of the program with just a few And there are many more tributes that we would have liked to read out. And also to say, I think Boo is here, who's another godmother. Are you here, Boo? I think so, she's here. But all the godparents are here. I'm not sure I will honor up to that commitment. Bram is a bit of a handful.
Okay, good morning everybody, and it's a great honor to be here with you. My task today is just to read out some of the messages, and of course apologies for not being able to include them all, but I would also like Trish to take joint responsibility if I go beyond my 5 minutes, because you chose which ones I'm going to read, so they may go beyond. Okay, so the first one is from Father Dick Mkwemte Oriadon, sorry if I'm not getting that right. Kallie was so affable and so open-hearted, like his little brother. We could easily think he was Irish. Kallie once said to Pope John Paul II, JP, I'm the revolutionary you once were until power took you away from us. I can't forget visiting Kallie in Grooteskuur, where he told me he loved Pope Paul VI's letter, Progress of the People, and he quoted from it. Other people were always his focus. He did not talk about his own sickness. Yes, he was a true revolutionary. Hamba Gatle Mkonto. The next one is from Sheila Basel. In the early 70s, Kallie worked with me, I was General Secretary of NUSAS at the time, to establish a vibrant branch of NUSAS at the university. It was built on active debate, discussion, and actions emanating from students at other institutions. Before that, he had worked to establish a group at St. Nicholas Priory, which became an important springboard into the university. I remember Kallie's excitement when it all came together as a result of our plotting. Hambagatlem Konto. This one is from Marianne Potts. I remember Kallie's simulation games so well. We've heard them referred to already. And the impact they had on me. And it was 46 years ago. Such a clever way for us privileged white students to experience injustice in a game that impacted our perspective. And I remember Kallie's thoughtful kindness when I stayed in Oak Street with Jenny and Kallie and Trish Hanekom and Matthew McNally and others. I was going on a hike. Kallie gave me a book to take with me, The Grapes of Wrath. Such a beautiful, kind gift, opening me to another world. Kallie was very perceptive, kind and gentle, and somehow knew how to get under our skin at the same time. Thank you, Kallie, for all you gave us. From Trish Struthers. I met Kallie in the early 1970s when Albert Nolan inspired so many of us, which is with the theology of liberation and its implications for us South Africans. I lived with Kallie, Jenny, Trish, and others in Oak Street. He had a very strong presence. Kallie and I played chess when we weren't making alcohol-filled trifle for those in prison. Kallie used to visit St. Aidan's, this is Richard Crow. Kallie used to visit St. Aidan's College Students' Hostel in Grahamstown, a former Jesuit school which I attended. He used to leave books on bomb making and military strategy with me when he went to Fort Hare University, which was crawling with security police and spies. I used to stash these books under a panel on top of the massive cabinet of drawers and cupboards, formerly used by the Jesuits. This is Achille Mbembe. I met Kallie in a small place near Rome, attending a meeting of the International Young Christian Students Regional Secretariat. We visited the Vatican and had an audience with Pope John Paul II. I later spent time with Kallie's family in Harare and worked with him to set up the first steps for a Pan-African office. Catherine Hunter, that's me, joined us, and we worked on the first news bulletin of the Pan-African office. If I can just step out of Achille's message to say that my memory of that time was that Kallie sent Achille, who could only speak French, and me, who could only speak English. We couldn't speak each other's languages, to this Durangon farm somewhere outside Harare, and told us to get on with producing documentation for this brand new international YCS we communicated, but somehow we also managed to get the work done. Kallie later visited Cameroon, and I returned to Zim a few times and stayed with him and his wife. Bram was a few years old, and I remember how at his young age he was already fluent in Shona. Kallie was the first South African I had ever met, and apartheid was still the rule in South Africa. The way he lived his life gave so much hope to those who, during those difficult times, were dreaming of a more humane country. Kallie impacted many lives, including mine. This is Tony Osei Tutu. He's been on the pictures. There he is, on the top right-hand picture up there. That's from Tony. His commitment to the struggle for a better world and church was backed by the decisions and sacrifices he made in his personal life. He was down to earth, generous, and witty. His simple lifestyle made it easy to mix with all ages, races, gender, class. He contributed immensely to the progressive youth, student, and workers' movements, not just in South Africa, but across the continent. Rest well, Kallie. You served so well. Mahlape and I are grateful for your friendship and sharing life with you in the places like Paris, Melville, Yeoville, Maseru, and Pretoria. This is from Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi. I met comrade Kallie Hanekom, smiling, flip-flops, barefoot, in Harare in 1980. As I remember him, I think of the community that converged around Baines Avenue in Harare. This group of people were active in different formations and structures of the movement, both inside the country, externally, and internationally, such as Kallie being in the International Young Christian Students. There was a very strong Catholic and ecumenical link to us through the YCS, the Catholic Bishops' Conference, the Grail, and comrades like Father Albert Nolan, Mike Deeb, and Marilyn Aitken. We worked with these comrades in various structures of the movement. We infiltrated comrades into the country through these networks, including the Grail. They were received without question and given refuge for the first few nights before proceeding. The open yet underground house of Kallie and Jenny was a transit point for operatives who worked with Comrade Joe Gabi. I was dropped in the service lane once to take messages to those who were staying there. This captures the multiplicity of roles of Kallie. Those were heady times in Harare, but also dangerous times, but comrades did not give an inch. There was lots of debate, there was fear, there was fun and laughter, and a deep understanding of the bond that tied us all together. Hambagahle, Comrade Kallie. Pat Brickhill says, after the spate of bombs 24 hours a day, there were many occasions when the burglar alarm was triggered, and Kallie would walk over to us in the early hours of the morning to alert us, as we had no phone. We spent a lot of time with Kallie. Kallie would bring the boys over to our house, and we'd drink coffee while he and Paul or the children played chess. And then just a few thoughts of my own. The one is that Kallie was what, in a way, integrated me into Trish and Derek's family. I've known him for 40 plus years, and I was part of what Virginia was describing as the old YCS group, and I was the organizer and so on. And my overriding memory of him was that he must be the most unpretentious person I've ever met in my entire life. He had very little concern about rank. He was as respectful of older people, younger people, senior people, junior people, and so on. But he also had a way of nudging people in a very sort of polite, gentle way to laugh at themselves, and I certainly was on the receiving end of a lot of that. He was very gentle, and just two stories, well, one maybe, that my sister Laligay, who would love to be here today, was a very close friend of Kallie's. And she talks about how Kallie, when he used to visit Emmerentia Dam, for those of you who know Joburg, huge dam, and as always happens in parks, there is a sort of war going on between the pedestrians and the cyclists. I'm sure you all know that. And Kallie, in his underground training way, would go to Emmerentia Dam long before there were guards or anybody who would know he was there, And he had marked out a circle all the way around Emerentia Dam, and he would walk around it, breaking off the twigs and so on, to redirect the cyclists so they would go around the external edge of Emerentia Dam, and us remaining pedestrians could walk safely on the inner circle. And of course, he didn't have any credit for that. He just sort of broke the twigs and cleared the way and so on. And sure enough, anybody who knows Emerentia Dam now knows that the cyclists keep well out of our way, so we can have fun with our dogs. So Derek introduced me to Trish. Trish I had worked with in the church, and then to Derek. And I'm very much part of the family now because my brother was part of the same trial that they were in. And it's all thanks to Kallie. So sleep well, dear friend, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you for all three tributes. We're going to have an appropriate song before we move to the next set of tributes.
It's a song that was very popular in YCS, and Vincent is going to play. He was the national leader of YCS, so thank you.
Thank you, a very beautiful choice of song. The musical items were a family problem. And yesterday I was in a meeting with Trevor Fowler, who's sitting in the tall man that looks smart. And I said, I'm not sure that everyone's going to know each other's songs. Do you know Solidarity Forever? And he said, Solidarity Forever. So thank you for, it felt like a throwback, and it was a lovely throwback. Thank you. We're going to move on to the next set of tributes, and I haven't been introducing people particularly. The first speaker in this set of tributes is the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Latrice Tsenoli. the first president, I think, of
Trish, Kallie's farewell today is an interesting one. I know for certain that many of you sitting here, the police would have been interested in your goings and doings. So they would be on your, you would be in their files. And it's a great reunion of people I've seen, we've worked with before and so on. And I think this is what this kind of gathering, he would have had a great hand behind its taking place. And this is why I'm very happy that the family asked me to also pass a word or two in his memory. I now understand why speechwriters used to say, check against delivery. Because as I'm sitting here listening, but also recognizing other people here, I also noticed that there's a commonality with Kallie I didn't recognize fully in the past. And that is that many sitting here may not believe so, but I worked for the church at some stage in my early years, in the 80s, at Diaconia as a communications organizer. And I was recruited amongst 3 or 4 people who applied for the job of this nature, and I was picked to do the job. And because Diaconia then sought to persuade congregants of different churches in the ecumenical movement to take action to bring realization to their faith and what they believed in. That's the part that I associated with completely. And because of the work we were doing in the underground then, we were... Okay. Because of the work we did then, it was very important for us to communicate as widely as possible and mobilize people behind the struggles we were involved in. It is crucial that when we got to hear of the work the church was doing, but people from different communities, that it was sensible for us to persuade people in communities who were not necessarily Christian to see the necessity for collaboration and acting together. My recollection is that as a result of that work, many people came to the campaigns persuaded to do so because it was consistent with their faith. It was relevant to achieving their goals. And so the 80s thrust Kallie and others to the surface, so to speak. Tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of the UDF. When we launched the UDF, firstly, I sat in a meeting in which we were debating elsewhere what path is the struggle likely to take? Are we going the insurrectionary route, or is it going to be a different route, an organizational route? And so the conclusion was that the organizational route is the best route, the building of organization, because insurrection is not going to be sustainable and it won't have stamina over a long period of time. So the front became the path that was chosen. And I think this is, when you look at Kallie's life and what he chose to follow, to work across boundaries. There are many people sitting here who had experiences in all the 4 pillars of the struggle. The international, the underground, the armed struggle, and the mass struggles. Those experiences inform their understanding and their appreciation of why the reconstruction and development still require elements of those, not entirely completely. And I wanted to say that Kallie was a subversive, classical subversive, because he worked with us in the Sanko office to support the leadership in the work we were doing. A sense of humor, absolutely hilarious stories he used to tell us. But his commitment was absolutely fascinating to watch, and how he was connected in many different ways. I'm with Bruno Villani here from Mpumalanga. He was the deputy secretary of Sanko when it started. And so as soon as he heard from me, I told him and another one from Butterworth, who unfortunately couldn't be here, that Kallie has gone. And he said to me immediately, I'm coming there. I thought to borrow from a few people, because Kallie's life represents key messages that in their own way, Bertolt Brecht, when he said, it is okay to fight for 5-10 years. It is better still for 20 years. But there are those who we cannot do without. And Kallie, those who were lucky to be able to be with him all along and listen to him, would convince us that he did it up to his last breath. And those are those that Brecht says we cannot do without. But since we are in a Catholic church, I can't not read this message from a Catholic. Whatever you know of me, may I just hold this for me, please? My hands are not working properly.
Now he's behaving like a deputy speaker.
What I wanted to say is that...
I'll hold for you.
Okay, because this thing gets away out of the way, so my hands are not up to good scratch. I thought I must refer to this person who was in grief, Chimamanda Ngozi.
Stayed his revolutionary course and didn't drift off into eccentricity too much. The next period of Kallie's life, after those heady days of the 1990s, I think is a period of his life that has been so special because he influenced so many people. We were busy with trying to do our best to build our country, and Kallie has had such influence on younger people through the coffee shop and then his final years in Fishhook. So our two next speakers, who will come straight after each other, are Godfrey Chauke, who was a stalwart of the coffee shop, I think, and Letty Matthews, who Kallie loved dearly, who was his friend together with the Fishhook community, who I think nurtured and loved Kallie in his last years.
Good morning. Good morning, friends, family, Kallie's family, his comrades. My name is Godfrey Chauke. I came into Kallie's life in a rather odd way because, I was looking for an odd job. Just had my girlfriend from Pretoria who was coming to live in Cape Town, and I needed some extra bucks. And off came the coffee bean. And I didn't know anything. I think the year must have been around 2022, 2023. I was just a medical student, bored.
You've got the year wrong, but carry on.
Okay. 2002. What did I say?
You said 2022.
Thank you. 2002 to 2003 as a medical student. I didn't know much about coffee, and there I was looking to be just a waiter. And I think the coffee bean provided quite a lot of opportunities, networking opportunities, learning opportunities, even for a medical student at the time. It really was an area where many great young people were meeting, working, or students coming across together the coffee bean. I mean, the only coffee at the time that I knew, having grown up in the township at the time, I mean, I was never part of the struggle or anything that associated me with knowing many other things other than what we had at the time or what was given to us, which was coffee, I think. I mean, it really, from then on, I started to be taught by Kallie and Bram. I think one of the people that was there most of the time was mainly Bram. Then Kallie will come in late, then teach you how to make those little Americanos, those cappuccinos, etc. So luckily, we both got to get the job, myself, and later on my girlfriend. And one of the first things that you'd notice was that you meet Bram, and Bram speaks to all these people, his father the same, and he say, but you also speak Shona, which was very strange for me. I mean, you are in Cape Town, you happen to be in Cape Town, how, and not a single person explained how the connections, all the history, and we work, you know. Now, one of the interesting things at the time says, well, you meet, this is your boss. Bram introduces you to Kallie. He's also my father, but then you call him Kallie. And I want to call him, okay, boss. I want to call him sir. But it becomes a whole lot of saying, look, I am Kallie. And it was very hard at the beginning, but I got used to the fact that he was Kallie. Now, it became a very interesting period because now you're working with your two bosses and they have a father-son relationship. You notice something very special about that relationship. You know, here's a son given all the opportunities in terms of doing whatever he wanted when he's not there, and never told, do lift, do this, 10 left, 10 right. And it seemed like a very beautiful relationship. It's just one of those that looked really beautiful from a distance and even closer. You could see that they had the best relationship ever. And I think that's when I started having many conversations with Kallie. While working and while working at the Coffee Bean, a very strange thing happens that we drive to Fishhook. And as we're driving to Fishhook in his flat, I come across a rather strange things in his house, in his flat. Remember, I didn't know who Kallie was. I had never known why Bram spoke Shona. But in his house, there are many ANC memorabilia. There are lots of flags. There are lots of many things in the house. And I stop and I say, Kallie, wait a minute. What is this about? What is this? By then, I had read almost anything and everything about the ANC. We've never even spoken about politics. We've never discussed anything political. I'm just a med student working for Kallie. Now, out of that came out a very interesting friendship relationship, you know, sharing of things. And he says, oh, no, actually, I was part of the Umkondo Wesizwe. I was in exile. I look at him. Again, an odd situation happens. He's white in the township. What we knew was a struggle icon was, other than the fact that you would have read about Slovo or so, a white guy living a simple life, not driving a Mercedes-Benz. That was rather odd. And here he is showing me the newspaper articles, what he was doing while in exile. I mean, how they avoided the security police, and so on and so forth. And I get really fascinated. He too gets fascinated about what I knew about the ANC at the time. And that relationship went on to start more conversations about the coffee bean, in and around the coffee bean, how you live your life every day, how to avoid dangers. I mean, I think the coffee bean was just across this ATM machines, and every now and then you'd see these guys who come in and to try and take people's money and their cards. And he had a way, without compromising his own safety, to distract these guys. And it was the most fascinating thing to really watch. And he would teach you and say, these are the things that we would do back then. But I think we went on to become friends. I would write a lot of things. How many minutes? I don't know how. Okay, let me close. But I think more than anything, I appreciated a lot. I came to realize how much he sacrificed for many of us who were never part of the struggle, who were just in the townships. That him as a white, it must have really meant it really meant a lot for him to leave everything else and say, well, I will choose a life of principle, I will fight for others, and fight for others he did, and to many of us, he was a hero, and I would like to say, fare thee well, good friend, until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. While Letty's coming up, his dear friend, and I think you might be speaking to us in Afrikaans, feel free to, Letty. I thought I would just share with you, because Godfrey prompted it, to say about the car guards. Kallie, for what reason I don't know, was once dressed in a suit and going to catch the train, and the story he told us is that he was followed down the escalator, clearly by people who had every intention to mug him, and they wanted his money and his cell phone. He had no money, which wasn't unsurprising. The cell phone, I don't know if the younger people here will even know what an Alcatel cell phone is. But it was an Alcatel cell phone strapped together with sellotape. They took pity on Kallie and asked him if they wouldn't like him to get him a new cell phone.
Ou Kaalvoet Kallie, vir vishoek was jy net Kaalvoet Kallie, met die koerant in die een hand en plakkies in die ander hand. Kallie was so bietjie soos 'n reënboog, dan daar en dan elders elders, maar tog daar. Hy het verdwyn. Vishoekse mense sal jou altyd onthou vir jou tyd wat jy gehad het vir ander. Vir my, Kallie was net die Afrikaanse Kallie. Ons het nie gepraat van die wêreld nie. Ons het gepraat van sy ouers. Hy het vir my vertel waar hy groot geword het. Ons het gepraat van ons kinders, ons kleinkinders en ons families. Ons het gesels oor die volgende staproete wat Kallie nog nie gestap het nie, of wat hy al Vishoek plat gestap het. Ons het gepraat waar gaan die volgende koffiedrink wees, nuwe koffiewinkel. 'n Belangrike ding is, wat hy vir my geleer het, sy ma en pa het een Engels sprekend en een Afrikaans sprekend gepraat. So ons het nooit Afrikaans gemeng nie en ook nie Engels nie, so dit was suiwer. Wanneer ons in 'n volgende gaste koffieplekkie sit, dan het ons oor 'n mees belangrikste ding gepraat en dit is ons daar is vir mekaar. Ons het geweet dat daar meer is, dat God in sy woord vir ons gevra het om vir mekaar net lief te wees. Ons het nie nodig gehad om groot te gaan nie. Ons moes anders lyk as hierdie wêreld. Jesus het na Kallie se operasie met sy hartstilstand en hy weer vir meer as 3 maande deel van ons kon wees, waar ons tyd saam met hom kon spandeer, het spesiaal dat ons vir hom nog kon gaan bid en saam met hom 'n pad stap. And it's all about God's grace.
Thank you very much, Letty, and all of Kallie's friends from Fishhook. We're going to end this section again with a few special messages. We are running behind time. We're going to catch it up because we anticipated that everyone would exceed their time. So if I can ask Mubin, where are you, Mubin? Oh, there you are, right in front of me.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will listen to Trish because she looks like she can hurt me. I've been given a list of things to read from, and I do apologize in advance to anyone whose name I mangle or sentences I don't read correctly, mostly because I can't read and I've just memorized the sounds and the words. So if I make any mistakes, please forgive me. Can I begin, Trish? I mean, this delay is not my responsibility. Okay. These are all snippets and messages that people have sent. And if you look at that WhatsApp group, there's way too many to cover. So we've taken a few, and if yours hasn't been included, blame Trish, I had nothing to do with this. The first person is Linda Hunter, someone who participated in the Olympics, and these are her words. So sad to hear about Kallie, my first running coach in Zimbabwe about 36 years ago. A wonderful coach who brought his 2 young boys to come and cheer me on when racing. He was unique and will never be forgotten. Deepest condolences to all the family. Okay. That's not the person we're going to go with. Someone called... Don't worry what's behind you. It's okay, Trish, I already told you I can't read, I just look at the pictures. Okay, so the next person is someone called Karen Vicency. I'm sad to not drink coffee with him again as he reorganizes the tables, engages with the waiters and other regulars, and peruses all the papers available, leaping from subject to subject in his talk. Sad to walk at Emerentia and recall the walks with him there, as he claimed the bicycle tracks for his own and made that a place of his own that he shared with Magda. How I wish he could hear all the words of acknowledgement, recognition, and delight in who and how he was, in his multifaceted and barefoot way, and the contributions he made to human rights. Almost there, people? Just bear with me. Next person is Mohammed Desai. Kallie was incredibly well versed with almost everything. In particular, I enjoyed listening to him speak about international politics, imperialism, and global shifts in power. He could give you the details of the latest developments in international affairs with a good dose of humor thrown in, which made it such a pleasure to spend time with him. When I first met Kallie, I was amazed by his humility. He would take the time to discuss anything, kind, humbled, principled, and thoroughly genuine. He would walk around barefoot and never care if you were a billionaire or homeless. He was an unapologetic supporter of Cuba, Palestine, Western Sahara, and very proud of his MK days. The next person is someone called Henri Michel Yere. Kallie gave us a home with a coffee bean. I remember that one of the first places I went to after our graduation ceremony at UCT was the Coffee Bean, just to present Kallie with my degree, my way of saying to him that he'd been part of this journey, and to say thank you for his kindness, his affable and open disposition. I particularly liked listening to him share memories of his stay in Europe during the struggle days, and many more things indeed. So many good memories attached to him and to the Coffee Bean. Hambakahle Kallie. The next person is someone called Erin Bates. And Erin, I think at this moment in time, is a journalist. But this is... Oh, Erin, where are you? I hope I don't mess up your message. And immediately after Erin, there's actually another message to read, which... Sorry, Trish, it's not on the slides. And Erin presents, and both these messages present two sides of the same coin that was the Coffee Bean. I first met Kallie through the Coffee Bean in Rondebosch as a high schooler in the early 2000s. It was a lively hub of student activity with an eclectic book collection, horn board games, chessboards, and pretty regular talk about Zimbabwe's changing political fortunes. It was a safe space, my parents thought, for me to wait after school until my mother could pick me up. My late father, who didn't drive, would take the train from town and meet me. We would wait for our lift, having coffee and biding our time. I recall that for my father, an eccentric sort who read widely and had loose links to the Progressive Party, for which he canvassed as a young man, his chats with Kallie were a rare time of political communing and engagement. I remember Kallie as kindly and welcoming toward him. Kallie, to me, was someone who didn't look down on my father with holes in his shoes and myriad peculiarities. Rather, Kallie, with his characteristically alert gaze and switched-on demeanor, would engage him intellectually. And I'm very grateful for that kindness, because I know it would mean a lot to my father. Kallie's role in our country's politics and what that demanded of him and his own family only really began to occur to me as I grew up and learned more about what the struggle meant, where the political and personal interweave. The next one, unfortunately, this person shared a lot with Kallie and doesn't believe in deadlines or printing pages. I'm surprised he even knows how the internet works. This is from Riaz Salke, who was a regular at the Coffee Bean. It's actually how I ended up meeting Kallie. So Riaz would spend his time at the Coffee Bean and drag me along, and we were what I'd like to call the night shift. Erin's message speaks beautifully about what happened in the Coffee Bean during the day, but once the sun set, that was a totally different place. Okay? Probably best avoided. So here's Riaz's message. I'll try and read it as close to original as I can. Like I say, can't read, and it came very late. I look back on those Coffee Bean years with Kallie as some of the best of my life. There was always a heady mix of students, old folks, churchgoers, addicts, ex-addicts, yuppies, refugees, lawyers, politicians, artists, musicians, actors, filmmakers, and writers. With Kallie, that bemused look on his face, presiding over it all in shorts and flip-flops. Kallie created a place for the loners to go to feel less lonely, for the outcast to feel less cast away, and for everyone else to just be themselves, who were drawn there by his generosity of spirit, his warmth, and his roguish charm. He would just grab people and foist them onto others and instigate friendships and relationships. There were hints of Kallie's former anti-apartheid struggle. No harm done, Joe. So yeah, like I say, I took it very personal. I know people here are going on and on about how amazing clothing that doesn't go past the knee. That's a crime, and you can be jailed for that in Saudi Arabia, I'm told. Okay? So, like I said, that I just couldn't get past the no shoes. I mean, I don't know, everyone here seems to think is the best thing about Kallie, but for me, no. That's as far as we went. And every time Kallie tried to get me to interact with any of the things he was involved in, I think at the point he had kind of slowly phased out of running, but he tried to get me to play that game, the one with the horses. I don't know what it's called. The pro-feminist game where the queen is the most important person on the table. I don't know what it's called. Don't worry. It's probably a passing fad. I don't see it catching on anytime soon. Right? So yeah, like I say, please don't praise Kallie for the things that were quite frankly wrong. I mean, I remember the exact thing I told him when I saw him. What is wrong with you? Were you raised in a barn or some other hole like Benoni? I'm sure that did not upset him in the least. But yeah, like I say, our friendship is defined by insults. We've never said hello like normal people. We've always started out with an insult. An unfortunate habit that these children have also caught on to, but unfortunately they're no good at it. All right? So half the time it's like, I don't know, it's like, let them speak or try to speak. I'm sure their words, someone else had to write it for them. And as we know, Brampy can't actually write. But seriously, Kallie, despite his lack of clothing etiquette, never judged anybody, whether you were white, black, Muslim, Christian, or Man United supporter. He was never upset at your own personal belief system. He would engage you, explain his point of view, or just let you ramble on and talk endlessly, which I think is probably another earmark of our relationship. And I'd give him his turn to ramble on. He'd always tell me about his family. I think he would tell me about his brother Derek, who was a pediatrician, and Trish, who was a dietitian. I don't know. I honestly didn't pay attention. So yeah. I really, much like Godfrey, didn't know too much about Kallie the man prior to his time in the Coffee Bean. And as far as I could tell, he was always just the eccentric man who refused to wear decent clothing and would be more than happy to serve you with whatever you asked for, as long as it was coffee and or tea, because there was nothing in the bean. I mean, there's a time when all he could serve was, okay, Mubin, are you going to have the coffee or the tea? Like, I'll have the coffee, sorry, we only have tea. Okay, why did you offer me that? Part of the bean's attraction was that it was one of the few places you could go to after 10. So it did attract quite an oddball crowd. And for whatever reason, both myself and the Riaz became the de facto taxi drivers for the staff. It was like, are you going to take just opposite the Turkish baths? And I thought, okay, if Kallie's not here, I'm going home. And you walk in and there's Kallie sitting in the middle of a crowd, completely surrounded by people, just utterly and completely at home. I don't know how he did it. He could insert himself into any crowd and be completely comfortable, despite his lack of proper clothing. Okay? So, yes, Trish, I see you there. Don't worry, I'm almost done. So yeah, I really don't want to hold you guys back. I think, again, one of the last conversations Kallie ever had with me, where he took out this tiny bag, and as he opened it, all these diamonds spilled out. And he said, Mubin, I think I'm going to put the diamonds. What was that, Trish? We don't have time for that. Okay. Sorry, maybe later. I'll put an end point on this conversation. I can talk nonsense about Kallie all day long. We all have our memories of Kallie, and we all have the things that he brought to our lives. And Trish, Derek, don't take this the wrong way, but one day in this South Africa of ours, when there is a monument, a bridge, or a railway named after Hanekom, it probably won't be Kallie. Okay? Kallie will be remembered for his legacy of, well, literally just talking to people. He could talk to anyone. I've seen him talk to Zionists. I've seen him talk to imams, rabbis, and you wouldn't know that he did or did not support their position. He gave everybody the equal opportunity. And just between us, I'm convinced that Kallie was the world's worst Zionist. Not what you think. He was just a terrible Zionist. He didn't understand how Zionism worked and kept on talking about Palestinian rights or human rights. Okay. Trish, you can stand as close as you want, but I'm almost done. Almost done, Trish. You brought this on yourselves when you asked me to speak. Okay? You could have just left me at the back and said, go eat a pie or something, but no. Yeah, Mubin, say something nice about Kallie. What can I say about Kallie the other thing about Kallie, and probably the reason that I thought pitching up here would help, Kallie owed me a substantial sum of money. All right? And I was almost upset till I realized that the 17 Rand 50 he owes me, those diamonds are worth way more. Sorry, Trish, we don't have time for this. I understand. Trish, I got one last thing to say. Okay? So, Kallie will be remembered, and you'll see Kallie reflected in the things you do, sometimes in the things we say. For me, I look at the receding hairline of his sons, and it reminds me of Kallie. Joey over there, if his receding hairline was a rugby player, he'd be scoring a try on the other side. I look at Brampy, and if his receding hairline was a soccer player, it would be booked offside. Okay? But I don't want to get personal. You guys have your own memories of Kallie, and as time goes on, we will probably not wake up every morning thinking of Kallie Hanekom, but his presence, the things he did, and the way he affected us will always be there. And so yes, Trish, you don't have to bring out the big guns. I'm actually finished, but I figured I'd make this stretch out just a little bit longer. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you for not throwing any shoes or anything at me. I'm going to hand over to Trish. Are you sure you want this, Trish?
Just before you let Munib off the hook, Munib, none of the disdain that you had for Kallie's barefootedness or your lack of appreciation for his clothes, none of that has led to any kind of sense of aesthetics on your part for shoes or on your dress.
Can you both sit down? Thank you, Robbie. No, I'm not giving you the microphone. Go. No, the person, I was worried about a few people on the program, and everybody took liberties. I wasn't expecting Mobeen to be the worst. But thank you for all the beautiful tributes. We are coming to an important part of the program for the family. Kallie was a very big influence in our lives. For Derek and myself and for his sons, he was one of the inspirations that have made us live our lives as ANC activists. And we really feel very privileged that Mavuso Msimang will pay tribute. And we think it's a time that we can honor Kallie by really remembering where we come from. And maybe we can't undo the past, but we can certainly make decisions about the future. So we're very pleased that Mavuso Msimang, who's the Deputy President of the ANC Veterans League, will speak on behalf of the ANC. He's a giant of the ANC struggle. Those of you who are younger and who've never met him, This is a member of the Lutuli detachment. He has a very big story to tell, and is one of those who really inspired us, along with others, to struggle for a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa that we all believe in. And he inspired Kallie and many of us of our generation to strive to build a better South Africa. Do you need a chair?
Do you have it?
I can bring you a chair.
The bus too? Don't worry. I'll try.
Oh, you want a bath? No. You're going to try.
We're all trying here. Even this guy who spoke before me was very trying. I stood up when Comrade Trish, this is how we call each other here, said I was a giant. There is no doubt that physically I am taller than many people, but I think it ends there. Men, I'm going to struggle because I need to balance. But when I tire, I will. Colleagues, respected audience, we're not congregants, we're not in church here. I bring warm greetings from the ANC Veterans League. I also bring you greetings from Comrade Popo Molefe. Tomorrow they celebrate 40 years of the launch of the UDF. We salute them for that accomplishment. Kallie, whom I did not have the privilege of knowing personally, was by all accounts, I've heard this morning, a very down-to-earth person and a very good and funny human being, but also a Democrat to boot. I really liked what Karen Vincenzi said in a WhatsApp group. I removed very many things that she said. She says, I'm sad not to drink coffee with him again, as he reorganizes the table, engages warmly with waiters and other regulars, and peruses all the papers available, leaping from subject to subject in his talk. She observes further that Kallie's determination to receive his terminal health care at a state hospital speaks to his commitment to equality. It's obviously a choice he made quite early in his life. I particularly love this cogent observation by Karen. He used to say, she says, that with small children, if you do something 3 times, it becomes a game. Well, in the same WhatsApp group, there is Sipho Hotsticks Mabuse, famous musician, who says if he didn't know Kallie, he knew him from the postings on the platform. I feel the same. Now, Fatima Mir, who died in 2010, she's in perfect peace now that she's not with us in current South Africa. She had this to say, and please excuse me, I'll quote at length. We have to be in the process of perpetual revolution to progress and guarantee the rights of people. There can be no peacetime so long as there is poverty and hunger, and so long as basic human rights are trodden. The cause of rampant crime in our country is inequality. She pleads quite tenaciously. We are the second most unequal country in the world. Well, that was in 2010. We have jumped or descended to the first. We're right at the top now. So he says, more than half the population in this country lives in poverty. Can we call this living in peace? The definition of peace is equity, harmony, not starvation. I believe we need to strengthen the numerous community-based organizations in our country and increase the voices of civil society. Kallie departs when this situation described here by Fatima has worsened, when the lights have literally dimmed and our energy is sapped. And with that, the productivity that grows the economy and creates jobs has killed. He leaves us when criminality rules the roost, having gained access right into the innards of the Party of Liberation, which happens to be the party in government. This is the party to which most of the people assembled here today belong. It's a party under whose banner I have walked for 65 years. I'm not claiming to be 65 years, a little older. In fact, I was born into this party, which was once glorious. When it was looked after by my forebears, this chartered the Freedom Charter. The Christians helped them look past the epidermal pigment to find a democrat. Where one existed, they embraced it. We are at fault. We forgot to tell the young people of today about the moment in history when Doctors A.B. Kumar, Monty Naika, and Yusuf Dadu stood shoulder to shoulder to form an epochal pact that is considered to have played a major role in the liberation struggle. Those were the three doctors. 1947, they formed a pact. One was leader of the Natal Indian Congress, Transvaal Indian Congress, and Kuma of the African National Congress. How much do modern chauvinists know about Basil February, who died in his boots during the 1967 Wankie campaign? I was his commander. Does the bumbling ignoramus who once talked about the oversupply of some of our citizens in the Western Cape know about the Trojan Horse Massacre? When in October 15, 1985, apartheid forces and the railway police shot and killed protesting students. It was Jonathan Klassen, 21 years of age, Sean Mahmoud, 15, and Michael Miranda, only 11. And they injured many others. Who in our glorious organization even bothered to chide this man? Talked about an oversupply in some parts of our country, let alone put him through a little bit of political education. That this man was later to become the advisor and spokesperson of an ANC president speaks to the depth of our political dissent. Apartheid murderers killed Dulcie September, the ANC representative in Paris at the time. But now we seem to be increasingly finding that there is no place in the rarefied decks of for people who look like her in our organization. Ruth First, killed 30 years ago today, 38 years actually, yesterday. Jeanette and Dr. Catherine, all these women killed in bomb explosions in Mozambique and Angola respectively. Since we are a bunch of decent human beings who are assembled here, let's pause for a moment in silence and think about Fritz, Catherine's and Marius's son, who survived the massacre in Angola, a toddler then, but never fully recovered from the trauma of seeing his mother and sister murdered before his eyes, and subsequently developed epilepsy as a direct consequence. We talk about the dead and forget about the trauma of the living as a consequence of what murderers do. Proud as these and tens of other fellow citizens, the ones I talked about, joined their darker-skinned comrades in death at the hands of assassins, some of whom, by the way, continue to walk the streets of our liberated South Africa. Small wonder people sometimes ask, liberated for whom? O Tempora, O Morris. While on the vexed subject of human classifications, we do need to find a quick way of moving out of this apartheid-ordained classification of people. Proud as we are of our heritage, we cannot use this classification as a crude tool for determining who can or cannot lead a political organization, of assessing how to attend to the needs of people who are historically disadvantaged, or of allocating resources, etc., that are needed by the people. There has to be a different formula. The defense of this continuing classification is that people talk about people who were oppressed, and in particular Africans. I don't think anybody asked to be oppressed less than other people. If you were oppressed, you were out. They were out for you. Where we don't face any risk at all in terms of categorization, it's when we address the stubbornly persistent gender prejudices that exist even among the chartering classes. Women have collectively over the years, since the time when testosterone seemed to rule the roost, been oppressed by men. Brawn now has been relegated a little to the background. Brain rules supreme. Let us also be aware of the resurgent xenophobic frenzy that has seized our people. There was a time when you would tell people that, I think Reverend Lapsey mentioned something about having been kept in countries which suffered killings, whose infrastructure was destroyed by the people who thought keeping us was an act of hostility to them. We seem to have very little patience for them these days. We need to note that the criminality committed by non-South Africans is a direct consequence of the rampant corruption in the public service. How else do you explain a person who has got no document receiving the right to build a house. I want to reserve the private sector because most of the time we talk about the public sector. We'll deal with them at a certain time, not today. But they are the corruptors in chief. Without them, state capture would hardly really have existed. But that's a digression. It is the corrupt who give people with bogus or no IDs access to housing, who facilitate the issuance of IDs, SASA cards, and all of that. And so many of them are us, our nationals, and then of course others. The convenience of blaming all of these things on foreigners is hardly plausible. This insanity has reached such a ridiculous level that someone called Kallie's son a foreigner because he was born in Zimbabwe while he was in exile. That's the extent to which this phobia rules supreme. And we have a responsibility for this. You know, you can froth at the mouth by treating symptoms as we are presently doing, but we will not solve that problem. We will be with these people we don't seem to like for the next 100 years. All you need to do is ask Donald Trump, who thought he would build a high wall on the southern border of America and ask the Mexicans to pay for it. Well, where is he today and where is the wall? What will happen to this nation, South Africa, is that it will continue to diminish its stature as a leading African power. And what's more, it will lose the phenomenal opportunity it has to contribute to the elusive African Renaissance. We talk about it and talk about it, it's nowhere. But as we become insular and close people out on the basis of very artificial borders that were created by people who assembled in Berlin in 1884, we just cannot understand the paradox of our existence. Let me conclude. You spoke well for me, you took part of my time. You know, the coalition of losers that has been formed recently, which is led by a party that is spliced in yesteryears, dyed-in-the-wool apartheid practitioners and beneficiaries. It's led by a party that was birthed on the Fight Back slogan. In that coalition, you also have a party whose hands are stained with the blood of thousands of innocents. A party that put a condition to its being part of our accession to the long fought for freedom in 1994. There is now a coalition created by our almost criminal negligence. But I'm saying this coalition will not come anywhere near the victory line at election time if, and only if, even at this late hour, the ANC gives it to them. All the ANC needs to do, if it heeds the call by its veterans, is to act definitively, decisively, and remove, as a first step, all the corrupt and tainted among its ranks, all of them. The costly Zondo Commission, whose findings the ANC accepted, by the way, has told the nation who should be prosecuted and who should be further investigated. because of the role they played in state capture. For me, the task cannot be easier for the ANC. The names of the people whom Zondo fingered should not be on the parliamentary and provincial lists. Can you imagine? Big ones and small ones, fat ones and others. None of them. If you kept all of them out of the list, the people will begin to see that we were ready to go back to our original values. More needs to be done, absolutely. But I tell you, if we are able to do this, it doesn't seem to be very difficult. Remove them, you know who they are. Don't take them to court, the NPA will do that. Just make sure they are not on the list until they have cleared their names. It's a pact I believe we should make with society. While we're at it, may I conclude by saying, PRASA does need to be fixed. Comrade Derek is with SAA. I pity him, I feel for him. It will work better with him behind there. It's very tough. But what we do need immediately, the corruption at PRASA has cost the ordinary people a lot in money they spend looking for alternative transport. It has, you know what happened in the north not long ago in this place. So attending to PRASA, which could be a short-term thing, but removing all the funny people on the list is going to help us win this election. It seems easy. We should win. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mavuso. It's a strident call and wake up for those of us who are in the ANC that we need to do more. I think Kallie would have loved the hatred you have for corruption, and it was a hatred that he shared. It actually was difficult to go for a walk with him because he would go on in our ears about something that he disapproved of. So thank you very much for that, and I think it's a call for all of us to think about how we live our lives and make a difference. We're going to go to the end of our program. Before I call his sons, who will pay tribute to their father, I would like to read out the message from President Ramaphosa. He did phone and offer his condolences, and his message says, I offer sincere condolences on the recent passing of freedom fighter and patriot Kallie Hanekom, father of Joe and Bram Hanekom and brother of Derek Hanekom. At the age of 73, Kallie Hanekom has concluded a life of principle, struggle, and commitment to a free and non-racial South Africa. We wish the family well as you prepare to bid farewell to Kallie on Saturday, the 19th of August. We mourn and celebrate with you in spirit. So both Joe and Bram will pay tribute to their father. Thank you, Kallie. I don't know if any of you noticed that Kallie is here in a box. He was cremated. And thank you, Jenny, for these two beautiful people, Joe and Bram, and for the remarkable human beings that they are, following in your footsteps and creating footsteps for their own children and friends to follow in. Joe.
Dear friends and family, so we've just heard the many paths that Kallie trod. Few people could fill his shoes, mostly because he mistrusted them deeply. He was a complex, amazing man. He was infuriating. He was kind. He was generous. He was caring. He was insensitive. He was sensitive. He was great in a crisis, but impossible to pin down to a commitment. He was one of the most well-read and intelligent humans I know. He had an outrageous sense of humor. He got 3 out of 300 for maths. And anyone asking how he could possibly get that, he would proudly respond, he remembered a formula. He could brighten a room. He loved and was deeply interested in people and their stories. Kallie could also disappear into isolation, and for any of those who experienced it, know that it was because he cared intensely and was overwhelmed with the world, and that the world could not keep up with him or change fast enough. He visited us in the many places I stayed, in the UK, in Tanzania and Pretoria. And within a week, Kallie would know more people than I did. Within a week at my local coffee shop, he would be introducing me to the regulars. He would be introducing me to the waiters, the car guards, the Messiah in some cases. Years after my visit, I would have people asking, "How is Kallie? How's the old man? How's Mzee Kallie?" Kallie had an amazing ability to connect with anyone. He would not shy away from differences and would dig deeper until he fully understood the person. He could get away with asking deeply uncomfortable questions because he was genuinely interested. He would do so without judgment or exclusion. He had a unique way of bringing diverse groups of people together and find commonality between them. In this polarized world, we need more people like him. The world is certainly less interesting without him. We've lost a spark. I will miss waiting to talk to him until he'd finished the paper, while he handed me articles to read. I'll miss walking on the beach with him. I'll miss his total belief that me and Brahm were capable of achieving many things and amazing things. I'll miss his humor, his chaos, watching rugby with him, being dragged into places and meeting interesting people. Kallie loved dogs, and dogs would pine after him. Big Dog in Emerentia would be, and my dog Pepper, which is in one of these pictures, would pine after him for weeks after he left. Willow says that he'll be walking in heaven with Big Dog and Oompa next to him. I thought that was beautiful. I will miss the way he saw the world, and I'll miss the way he thought the world should be. I'll miss being in his presence. He was a runner, a chess player. He loved languages, reading papers, drinking coffee, walking, preferably with a dog on toe. He backpacked through the Eastern Cape in his 60s, spending time in Port St. John's. Kallie's possessions could probably fit in one suitcase. So many of the photos behind you, he's wearing the same shirt. He hated buying clothes. He would wear things well beyond their sell-by date. He created a community wherever he went. I'll miss him. That's it.
Now the pressure. Firstly, thank you all for being here. I want to acknowledge some people just in case, for the benefit of other people to know who's here. Today we have a rugby coach for the Stormers at the back. We have two or three well-known journalists. We have a dog walker from Fishhoek. We have a couple of politicians. We have the entire board of Africa for Palestine who flew down to show their solidarity and support. And I really do appreciate that. Everybody in this room is unique and special in their own way. We've got such a diversity, not just in age or religion or gender, nationality, even politically there's diversity here, and this is how Kallie was. I don't think we often find a celebration of somebody's life with such rich diversity, and in fact, I was dreading this, but then I started to get excited because I started to see who's coming, and I realized that the variety of people were going to give an adequate celebration of the complete diversity and mixture of people whom Kallie connected with or connected through his brother and children too as well. My mother, of course, who also played a very significant role. They were together for 19 years. And as it were, those were an important part of my father's life, my mother Jenny at the back. And I also want to say that, it's important to recognize that Kallie benefited a lot by us having our mother there to provide the stability we needed as children as well. And I'm also lucky to have the most wonderful man that my mother married, Hilke Jelsma, who provided great support. He's another father to us. So I want to acknowledge him as well, so that there's a full story of this situation. The first thing I would want to say to Kallie is sorry. I'm sure he's pretty disappointed to see me wearing a suit here, and some of the outfits that are being worn here is rather disappointing. I think my godfather, Michael Lapsley, made a good point about the wearing slip-flops and shorts. I also sat quite long and hard, not just trying to figure out what I was going to say, but what I was going to wear was quite a big decision. Eventually I concluded that he would be quite proud that there was such a diversity of sandals, suits, and I was hoping to see some shorts, but I think people were a bit timid. People were not strong enough. In fact, it's funny that people didn't notice Kallie over here in this box, because that was kind of Kallie's life. People really didn't really notice him. He blended in like with the wood here. And in fact, when I picked Kallie up at at Avbob yesterday, he was overdressed. He was wearing a velvet packet with a golden ribbon, which we had to strip off immediately. He'd have been overdressed for the event had we brought him and left him with this golden velvet ribbon. So Kallie is here in his full nakedness and pride, and I think so Kallie, you brought together this group of people who I think someone who Kallie was so fond of Lechisa mentioned earlier that there was a commonality. Ironically, I differ somewhat, because there was a commonality at some point with Christianity and religion for Kallie, but that commonality stretched quite far. In fact, I met Farid Isak through Kallie. My youngest son, his middle name is named Farid, and he's a godfather for that child. So, I mean, there's this diversity and complexity around Kallie and what Kallie was. No one fully understood who Kallie was. In trying to prepare this input on my father's life, I came to the conclusion that many people might have a book of their life, whereas Kallie had a series, multitude of episodes with common actors in them here and there, but none of them necessarily spoke to each other, and they were all very unique. I really was quite entertained by some of his Fishhoek friends who were completely amazed to see all these ANC messages in the WhatsApp group, because they just knew Kallie as this friend that they walked with on the beach, and Letty drove Kallie to the hospital and visited. So Kallie had this multitude of friends whom just liked him as a person, and he saw the humanness in each and every one of them, and he connected people, and he brought this incredible group together, and I'm really happy to be here. I thought I was going to be crying. Cried a little bit when my godfather spoke, but then I was really inspired. I really regret that Mabeen attended, but that's a mistake in the program. We'll do better next time for my uncle maybe, or someone else. Definitely Mabeen is not on the list. I think Kallie truly was a strange human being. I mean, he raised us telling us that if we were ever in the same city as Denzel Washington, we had a place to stay. And we never tested it, to be honest. But Kallie was an actor, you know. Less people are not aware that Kallie was an actor. I think it was one film he was in, but that was his claim to fame. On his CV, you can say he was an actor, you know, in the obituary and so on. He ran the Two Oceans, I believe, barefoot. I'm not sure. My uncle might be able to clarify. But he ran the Two Oceans when only 30 people ran that Two Oceans. And he at one point wrote the foreword to the Two Oceans magazine because he hadn't run the Two Oceans for, I think, 30 or 40 years between when he'd run it before. As mentioned before, he coached an Olympian, and these are things he did, little chapters, little episodes in his life that meant a lot to him. He also played a role in coaching his younger brother, Derek, and his younger sister, Magda, in running. He was the coffee shop guy, the dog walker, the comrade, the friend, the chess player, the joker, and the newspaper man. One of the people who phoned me about my father mentioned how they would see him at a coffee shop in Johannesburg, and they would see Kallie go to the newspaper guy on the corner and buy the newspaper, go sit down, drink his coffee, and then go back to the newspaper guy and return the newspaper. And one day they went up to Kallie and said, you know, Kallie, why are you doing this? He says, no. I take the newspaper, I fold it carefully, I read it, and I give it back so the newspaper guy can sell it again. So, he at different levels, he also saw the value of the street newspaper seller. The days in Yeovil in Rocky Street, I found out, I was always wondering why the room was so small. I found out it was a maid's quarters we were staying in there yesterday, and it all makes sense to me because I remember we were in this flat and it was very, very small. So we were staying in the maid's quarter, and Kallie used to tell us that there was a security guard on the street. It turned out he was the local drug dealer, but no one got mugged on the road because, there was the security, especially for me and Joe, we thought. He was many things. He was very, very interesting because his involvement in the struggle, from what I gather, actually went from the young Christians into the black consciousness movement, and he actually was one of the very few white people who could claim to have actually known and worked with Steve Biko. And it was through Steve Biko and there that I think he really got into and spent a lot of time on black student campuses. He described once how lonely it was being the white person in those days who was not fully accepted in the black consciousness movement, because he would say he would drive to people to the meetings and he would wait outside the meetings while they had the meetings. He said if you were a progressive man, you wouldn't want to go into the Women's Caucus meeting, but you could proudly sit outside knowing you supported the caucus. So he did this for many years, and of course Kallie and Derek and many people faced a lot of hostility from the white community in those days. I think there were a lot of tensions between my grandfather and my grandmother and Kallie. I think they blamed Kallie for Derek and Trish being caught. Kallie was very proud. They said they were caught, he was never caught. So they blamed him. They say Kallie and Derek, they were not that bright, they were not that clever. They got caught, and he was quite clear on that. But I think my grandfather, certainly, and grandmother, the assumption is that you see these people who get involved in the struggle, that they come from progressive families and so on, and a number of them did, but some didn't so much. And I think Kallie was a sort of turning point in the Hanekom family that did bring our name into the struggle, and we're very proud. I'm very proud of it. He raised me in a funny way. I remember him lining me up with a BB gun. He didn't like guns, but he liked rifles. He thought rifles for MK, it's a fighting weapon, whereas a handgun, it's like a criminal, a dangerous domestic weapon to have in the house. So I remember him lining me up with a BB gun and showing me how to crawl. And I lived my life up until a certain age, genuinely, truly knowing that I was going to join the MK. I knew. That was my life plan, and it all changed in '94 and so on, but it was a life plan and a dream that Kallie had instilled in me as a child. I remember strange things in childhood. I remember my godfather, who was my godfather before the bombing, and then of course apartheid sent him his bomb, and I remember going to hospital and seeing him without hands, and as a young child processing these things. But it was my childhood of which I'm very proud of, and very proud that Kallie gave me this this childhood, which is unique as he is. There were many other funny stories. I mean, playing with toys, he used to hide people at his house, and you wouldn't know who's who. They were going in and out of the house, and we knew we couldn't tell anyone there were people at the house. But one interesting story is I'm playing with toys, and there were nice people, really genuine, humble, nice guys would stay there and playing with the toy, and this guy sitting with me playing with the toy and chatting with me, and then eventually he says, "But do you know my name?" I said, "No." He says, "My name is Chris Honey. Remember that name." And sure enough, that was Kallie's life. It was surreal because it was never about boasting or showing off or whatever. It was really just how he lived, and he didn't really like other people knowing certain parts of his life. So he was really, I think, a sort of number of different episodes. In hospital, he initially was quite proud that he was between, he went to Victoria Hospital first, so he was between prisoners from Pollsmoor who were getting their medical treatment, and then also between some of the gunshot wound injuries there. And he was quite proud and very deliberate in having gone to the public hospital, which caused a lot of stress for us in the family, but it was a decision. But the funny thing is that they told me when I arrived at the hospital that he's delusional, he's lost his mind. And I said, "What do you mean? Explain." And they said, "Yeah, this guy's telling us that his brother's in charge of SAA." It's mad, bonkers. So there they are in this public hospital, and the fact of the matter is this mad person is totally lost his mind, thinks his brother's in charge of SAA, So that was the story of Kallie. Kallie was many things to many of us, but to me he was my hero. Anyway, that's all I can say.
Thank you to the very beautiful sons of Kallie. And of Jenny. I can't see you, Jenny. Thank you for your beautiful sons. We are coming to the end of the program. My apologies that we have run late. I thought even running late we would be done by 1 o'clock, and we haven't quite made it, but we are nearly done. Kallie was indeed the patriarch of the family. He was a huge influence in the life of his brother Derek. He was the constant voice to critique and remind those who held leadership positions in the ANC and in government that they had a responsibility to work untiringly to redress the triple burden of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. A great gift to have received from him, and a reminder to all of us as we celebrate his life to live our lives simply and humbly. Over to you, Derek, to read you.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. Mine is the more formal part, and I will stick to text as I have been instructed by the boss. The film was Cry Freedom, by the way. Kallie Hanekom, Kallie, to all who knew him, including his children and grandchildren, was born in Cape Town on the 12th of October 1949, firstborn son to Alfonso Hanekom and Sheila Mary Delaney. Kallie's childhood years were spent in Gardens and Tamboerskloof. He was the oldest of 3 siblings, all of whom went to the German primary school. The German he learned to speak there stood him in good stead many years later, in the 1980s, when he spent some time in the GDR undergoing training in military and clandestine work. He completed his high school years at Jan van Riebeeck School, and nice to see some members of the school here, some old school friends here, where he will definitely not be remembered for his outstanding scholarly performance. However, he does feature prominently in the school archives for his exceptional running achievements. He continued his long-distance running for a big chunk of his life, including running 7 comrades marathons. He cajoled his sister Magda into running, coached her, and proudly saw her become the Western Province 800-meter champion when she was quite young. He also helped, as you've heard, coached Linda Hunter, the Zimbabwean Linda Hunter, to run the marathon at the Seoul Olympics in 1988. Much later, he coached Magda's daughter, Mel, who also ran comrades marathons and even completed a crazy 24-hour run. Kallie delivered newspapers every morning before school to earn a bit of pocket money, which was all spent on running shoes and tracksuits. Already at a young age, he had no interest in material things. He led a simple lifestyle his whole life, driven by the belief that it was unnecessary to live with anything more than the bare essentials. His footwear barely extended beyond ownership of a pair of flip-flops. Karl Foot Kallie, some people called him. In 1970, the Stellenbosch University chapter started, a life-changing one in many ways. There was never, needless to say, there was never a graduation ceremony, but it was here that he met Jenny. The wedding was beautiful, unconventional, a bit hippie, and quite political, as just about everything in Kallie's life had become. He was active in the Catholic Student Society, and later became the president of the National Catholic Federation of Students. Albert Nolan, who was the Catholic student chaplain at the time, had a profound influence on Kallie's life and introduced him and many others to the concept and practice of liberation theology. What is less well known is that Kallie equally had a significant influence on Albert Nolan's own political growth in an era when it was becoming increasingly clear that peaceful protest on its own was not going to defeat the apartheid regime. South Africa was going through dramatic times. Kallie and Jenny moved to Observatory in 1976. A few young students moved into the house with them, including Trish, who ended up being his sister-in-law for the rest of his life. Lucky Trish. Let us express our deep sympathies and condolences to Trish for, what she had to put up with for the rest of her life. When Kallie was charged for possession of banned literature in the house, he told the magistrate he did not know Trotsky, and that with so many people living there, he couldn't possibly know who the book belonged to. He was acquitted. Much of the work that Kallie was doing as president of the NCFS, especially on black campuses, in the height of the black consciousness era, was clandestine, dangerous, and even hostile at times. He spent weeks at a time with SASO students at Fort Hare University and made several trips with Fort Hare students to King Williamstown, where, among others, he met and got to know Steve Biko. Although he was completely accepted and trusted, Kallie accepted the limitations of his role during those times. He worked behind the scenes in his own unique way. Soon after Zimbabwe gained its independence in 1980, Kallie and Jenny moved to Zimbabwe, as did a number of other South Africans who were either conscription dodgers or simply wanted to contribute to the building of this newly independent state that offered so much promise at the time. For Kallie, it meant getting more formally involved with the ANC, again, always playing a background role. Their house offered a welcoming environment and a haven for many passing through Harare, including those who were establishing their first contact with the liberation movement. Although some prominent ANC leaders visited the house, it deliberately never became an ANC house. Close and long-term friendships were formed in this exiled community. There were many good times, but it was never easy. Joe was named after Joe Kabi, who was brutally assassinated by the SADF in 1981. Mike Lapsley very nearly lost his life to a parcel bomb. Thankfully, he survived and is still with us. He is Bram's godfather. The son of a very close friend, Phyllis Naidu, was murdered by apartheid agents in Lusaka. Many others paid the ultimate price. In this period, unfortunately, Jenny and Kallie also parted ways, but Kallie remained an active father. Kallie's stint in the GDR, the then East Germany, came at a most interesting time, coinciding with the breaking down of the Berlin Wall. The military training, however, was no longer needed. The unbanning of political organizations was soon to follow, and Kallie wasted no time in getting himself back to South Africa. During the 4 years before the first democratic elections, he was active in his ANC branch in Yeovil. He did some work with the Five Freedoms Forum, and he set up a provident fund for staff at Shell House, the headquarters of the ANC at the time. However, what was probably most meaningful to him was working full-time with SANCO, the South African National Civic Association. Kallie's last, and you heard so much about it, his last full-time paid job was to run a campaign to keep Parliament in Cape Town. His brilliant creative campaigning was so good that he soon campaigned himself out of a job. As it happens, that paved the way towards the next chapter in his life, the coffee bean. Although Kallie was never one for material things, his one big luxury in life was coffee, and he loved talking to people. The coffee bean offered him an abundance of both. Once again, he had a profound influence on many people's lives during that period. He spent the last few years in Fishhoek, where new friendships were forged. As one of them put it upon reading the many tributes and reflections on the various chapters of Kallie's life, his Fishhoek circle of friends had absolutely no idea about the rich and illustrious story of this eccentric fellow's life. An unsung hero, the Cape Times said. As we know Kallie, that would just have made him irritated. But that is exactly what he was, a beautiful, kind, generous soul, more interested in the welfare of others than his own. He never wanted positions. He never strove to be wealthy, and he did not want to be sung. These are the qualities that make him the unsung hero. Kallie's sons, Joe and Bram, their partners, Andy and Marissa, and the grandchildren, Joe, Ben, and Willow, have a role model who is a truly unique individual to remember and emulate. He had the rare quality of being simple and humble, and a leader at the same time. He entertained, teased, joked, and played chess with his grandchildren and adopted grandchildren. Hambagahle, Comrade Kallie. Rest in peace, dear brother, father, grandfather, friend. You shaped us, and you will continue living in all of us forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to our final tribute, I just want to thank everyone on behalf of the family who's been part of Kallie's life's journey for being with him and for being with us. We are infinitely grateful to everyone who helped us to arrange this memorial. There'll be lunch served when we end, and we'll have a further opportunity to share memories of Kallie's life and reflect on how we conduct our own lives. Bram, thank you for acknowledging some of the people who are here. Time is against us. I would have loved to acknowledge many more. I'm sure you will understand if you haven't been acknowledged. I thought I would just mention that every night when we went to the hospital, we met Comrade Peace Mabe, who's here with us. Her daughter is in hospital also in Ward F17, and from our family we wish your daughter a speedy recovery, Comrade Peace. Also, just to, in general, to mention other parliamentarians and leaders of the Western Cape who here, some have left. Comrade Wilson Sandina is being buried today in Gugulethu, and his life story is somewhat like Kallie's, an MK combatant, a trade unionist, a UDF activist. So we've had many messages from people who are at his funeral. I'm now going to invite the wonderful Father Peter John Pearson to pay his tribute and deliver a closing prayer, and then we'll break for lunch. Thank you very much.
I had this wonderful poetic opening line of now as the morning hours slip into noon, and here we are at 1 o'clock, spoiling my opening line of this tribute. But it is true that as our morning gently transforms into memories, we do in this moment, in this solemn moment, we do collectively what each one of us has done individually in a myriad of different ways. And that is to give dear Kallie back to the God who gave him to us. And just as God lost nothing in giving Kallie to us, so we lose nothing of Kallie in giving him back to God. That beautiful prayer of B. Jarrett says it so poignantly. And it's my prayer for us as we gather in this hour. We seem to give them back to you, O God, who gave them first to us. Yet as you did not lose them in giving, so do we not lose them by their return. Not as the world gives do you give, O lover of souls. For what you give, you do not take away. For what is yours is ours also if we are yours. And life is eternal, and love is immortal, and death is only an horizon. And an horizon is nothing save the limit of our sight. Lift us up, strong Son of God, that we may see further. Cleanse our eyes, that we may see more clearly. Draw us closer to yourself, that we may know ourselves to be nearer to our loved ones who are with you. And while you prepare a place for us, prepare us also for that happy place, that where you are, we may also be always. In returning Kallie to his source, we lose nothing of him, as B. Jarrett says. We hold on to his courage, his wisdom, his indomitable spirit. For me to think of Kallie, and many memories come to mind, is also to think of Angela Davis, that feisty feminist, communist, Black Panther, whose sentiments Kallie lived so fully. She said on so many platforms, even while she was being searched for by the FBI, she said, "I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am now changing the things I cannot accept." And Kallie bored deeply into that shared international revolutionary consciousness and commitment, and he never stopped protesting. He understood that even when it was impossible in that moment to change injustice, there was never a time when we were absolved from protesting against injustice. There is never a time when we are absolved from speaking out, lest our silence be construed as consent. He understood those words, that to sin by silence when we should protest makes cowards of people. Kallie did not fail us in this. He led resolutely by example. He spoke strong words. He raised his fist defiantly, sang and taught freedom songs, read books whose ideas inspired him. And I've lost my page again. I always do this. Whose ideas inspired new possibilities. And he knew that reading was essential for those who seek to rise above the ordinary. It will be for me always that special memory of Kallie and the the coffee shop. And there were books there. And there were questions whenever I came there about what I was reading, what other people were reading. The titles were scribbled down on random bits of paper, and there was always the interrogation of ideas and always suggestions about what I could read and should read, and mostly never read. And then, in the most wonderful ways, there was Kallie's heart. B. Jarrett's prayer says that love is immortal. And for so many years, it was that heart, so capable of expanding to include his much-cherished family, his extended family. When I saw him in hospital, he was in tremendous pain, but he spoke about his grandchildren. He didn't ask me what I was doing. He knew better than that, I think. Presumed I wasn't doing much. His extended family, his comrades, who were indeed like family. That wonderful, stubborn, unquestionable, immeasurable, generous love will certainly be his strongest legacy. It was Che Guevara who reminded us that the true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. It is impossible, said Che, to think of a genuine revolutionary who lacks in love. And so, as we draw this memorial service to a close and allow our memories and our emotions to twine through our fingers like rosary beads, one of which he had from Dick O'Riordan and kept with him all the time through all his changing scenes of life, we find, and each of us is invited in a prayerful moment to find that sacred space that is within us and to offer in the silence our tremendous gratitude. And I ask you, if I may, to listen with the ears of your heart to that ancient prayer of the church, said always at funerals, that life is changed, not ended. And when our mortal bodies lie in death, we gain an everlasting dwelling place in heaven. In the words of the book of Numbers, Kallie, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance over you, and Kallie, may he give you peace. And for all of us, as we keep our hearts open and our heads bowed, may Almighty God in his great love bless us and keep us, strengthen us to complete history's task, and may the God of the past, the present, and the future bless us abundantly, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
What a beautiful ending. I wasn't going to say anything more, but I'm reminded, if I don't kill Peter John on the way, reminded that there is a memory book, and I know many of you have sent messages. We have been compiling all the messages, And we'll thank all of you individually, but there's also a memory book here if you want to write in it. There is lunch served. Please relax and enjoy seeing each other, including those of us who haven't seen each other for many, many years. Thank you.
Tina ban komkondo sis misere.